We are going to. It's not live.
No.
It's not live, but it is recorded. Okay, welcome along, everybody, to the next session in today's workshop relating specifically to Martin Swimming Pool Complex. Welcome, Toby. Thank you for your time to come and discuss some of the matters that and some of the complexities and difficulties we're facing. But I'll pass to you and Arno as our assets manager and the team to take us through the next steps of what we're looking to address.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a follow-up from the last council meeting where we discussed the Martin Pool in a bit more detail. And as we've said in that paper, at the moment we've got 4 potential options that is put on the table for council's consideration. They range from doing something minimal that will allow us to just rewind the clock to the facility exactly the way it was before we had that partial failure. And then it kind of steps up to, let's look at the facility in more in a holistic view. Let's have a look at the asset condition of everything that's in there in the entire facility. And it ends up option number 4 in a place that's more a long-term view. What would an asset look like that has a new 50-year lifespan that is geared for modern standards and will comply with what people expect of these facilities today? And we mentioned in that original discussion, there's a range of costs across those 4 options that we can consider. So as we've discussed in the paper, I invited Toby from Create to come and have a more detailed discussion today with councillors that would allow you to get into the detail a bit more and understand exactly how we've done this and how we've set all these numbers up. What I'm hoping to get out today is that you can have a combined view of what you want to achieve with the facility over the next 10 or 15 years even, but just have a combined view of what is the outcome that you want to achieve with the facility. And then we can look at how we set it up, just trying to achieve those things. And then the second part of the discussion would be how to fund all of those things. So I think if we may,
We'll leave it to you to step through where we go to.
When can we start talking about more detail around the numbers? And
I think with regards to the numbers section, we would have to step into public excluded to that purely to the commercial sensitivity of what some of the costings out of initial very high end suggested costings have come through. We've been needing to step into public excluded that as with regards to certainly the commercial sensitivity about it. What can we share with regards to the project itself and to some of the constraints that you've discovered in your reporting that you've had a look at? Is there anything that we can share with the asset condition across the board and some of those sorts of things?
Everybody's aware that we were introduced to the project given the failure in the roof. And through that investigation, we found that the roof structure and framing is now requiring propping. And so that was, and that there's an inherent capacity deficiency in the roof that needs to be remediated going forward. That failure of that particular roof beam has damaged the roof around it, requiring a certain amount of work. So the minimum was to go and rectify that immediate issue. And it wasn't to then strengthen the facility at all. So there was do minimum is literally put it back.
But it was, yeah.
It's still, in our opinion, aspects of it make it earthquake prone. And so the second option was to elevate in a strengthening sense, strengthen the roof, repair the roof from these primary leaks, resolve some of those key issues. And then the subsequent options were then to deal longer term down 2 and 3 were around either do you continue to work with the asset that you've got, or do you enhance the asset further with a longer term vision? So there was a consolidated approach where you have a large facility. Do you look to reconcentrate the water bodies within the 50-meter pool and re-optimize that? And then that was option 3. Or do you just keep with what you're going and have that longer term vision of repair. And that was option 2.
Sorry, councillor Davey, please.
I'm just, for clarity, really, the other end of the extreme might be to remove the roof as an option. Has that been considered?
So we haven't, I think part of today was to have those kind of conversations, really. We were trying to map out the do minimum to full refurbishment. But yeah, the conversations around other alternate approaches, new build versus, strip it back to an outdoor, those are conversations.
So if, in your initial assessment of the structural failure of the beam, which was the immediate risk, and which is what you're referring to as perhaps putting that back to a stage where we'd be exactly the same way as we were, and we can open the facility. But you're also part of the council directive from our earlier meeting was to take a more holistic view. When looking at the premises itself, what else did you see or discover when looking at the premises as a whole that you would have thought, well, to take a 50-year vision of this, what are the next steps that could fall within the initial stage of repairing the roof that you would say it would be good if you could do this, or if you could do this, to make it fit for purpose and to really bring it up from what is a very, very old complex? Is there anything you can share with us there?
Yeah, so the existing, the bones, some of the bones of the facility are good, and other aspects are not so. The primary structure is very resilient, concrete walls, concrete floors, and roof, they're good founding block. The pool is not in too bad a condition in terms of the pool shell. The other things that sit around it, the roof is leaking, it's uninsulated. The plant is almost at end of life in terms of both the heating and ventilation and some of the filtration to and from poorly circulating leaks across the board. And there are some compliance issues with the sanitary entry sequence and some shortcomings in fire safety.
Part of your assessment also was taking a broader look at the toilets, changing rooms, shower areas and those sorts of things as well. And
Yeah,
how did
so
you
in
find that?
option 3, option 2 was just to remediate the short-term requirements. Option 3 was, as shown on screen, was to remodernize that as part of a new refurbished facility. So option 3 on the screen was you have a very large single body of water, the 50-meter pool, which only serves as some specific parts of your community. And so to grow that wider appeal is to split the water bodies up and have maybe a 25-meter lane pool, some warm water for hydrotherapy, and learn to swim, and toddlers. And that would give you the broadest use appeal for the size of community that you have around you. And so that was option 3 is directing you to a longer term vision where you end up with a facility that appeals to a lot more people and is slightly less in its overall size and more tailored to the needs of the community.
I think there was something in the report also about the diving blocks too. Can you refresh us on diving blocks and optimum depth for standard now for horizontal diving? Was there something about that?
Yeah, so dive entry into the 50-meter pool is non-compliant. It needs to be at least, it's over 1.35 deep at the ends. And we currently, I think it's 1.1 to 1.4 in the middle. So to get competition diving really, and that's why they've been removed, as I understand, you need to deepen the pool.
Or raise the pool?
Or raise the water.
Raise the water level around.
Yeah.
And in doing that, that would potentially address the outside area, surfaces and pipeworks all at the same time, potentially.
Yeah, and given the level difference between the reception change and the main pool, there's a way of doing that rather economically by deepening the pool with new surrounds, deal with the drainage issues, because that was originally an outdoor pool area with outdoor drainage that is now, it's quite wanting in terms of accessible pathways in an internal environment.
Councillor Loudon, did you?
No, not yet.
Your worship.
Yeah, I think that you have to go back a step to start with and clearly indicate whether you actually want a swimming pool at Martin. And so, because I don't want that conversation to come up again at another time. So when you're potentially talking fairly large sums of money, one option is not to have a swimming pool and to have direct people to swim and fielding Palmerston and Whanganui. I'm firmly of the view that that this is a crucial infrastructural need for Martin. But I think that's step one, to affirm that.
I agree 100%. It's my understanding of the feeling from around the council table. And we're just having a workshop discussion here, but I believe the feeling from the council table is to retain the pool in some form. It's just what that some form needs to be. Councillor Lau?
I have a question. I'm just trying to get in my head or trying to understand the true value of a 50-metre indoor pool. Because it's been one of the conversation points in the community that it is a rarity to have one. And it is an asset, but it also is a liability as well. And do you have a view of having a 50-metre pool? Would it outweigh a 25-metre pool and other things?
They're highly emotive.
Understand that.
Things, you know, and obviously it's a prized element, but at some point you have an asset that's of a scale that you have to decide whether you can afford to run it or not. So I think we've worked with a number of councils and equally had these challenges with what to do with 50-metre pools. And some have, you know, invested and continued to use them, but they're earmarked for competition swimming. Yeah, for a certain amount of lane. They, you know, if they're set up well, they have wider use appeal for canoe polo, underwater hockey, a lot of other sports. But all of the warm water leisure uses, learn to swim, are not catered from that type of environment. So I think the modern needs of a community in terms of accessing water and therapy of water and rehabilitation has changed. And so it's a difficult question. You know, each community has their view on what they think is required, but it's challenging to make it stack up. And I think if you were to speak to Sport New Zealand, they would certainly direct you to this kind of approach where you move that way rather than stay with a 50-metre.
That's a good question to raise, Simon. Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that we're going to have all those discussions as we work through this as to the benefits of which option will benefit the greatest number of people within the community. So it's something we're going to have to work with. P.
So is the water polo and hockey, was it you mentioned? They're doable in a 25-metre pool though, aren't they? They're doing the Keno.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right. Mayor Andy?
If we proceeded with repairing the roof and infrastructure now, we could effectively delay that decision. In other words, if we repaired the roof as it stands, that doesn't preclude a decision in the future around lane length, etc.
No, so I think what the process that we were trying to help was to give you a stepping stone process from start to a potential end game. At some point, you need to decide which way you go. Otherwise, you could have invested. You know, you have to undo what the bit that you've done. So that's why we've stepped it through. There's a bifurcation at option 2 and 3, whether you keep you do the works to the learn to swim area, that small pool, or do you reconsolidate the asset as we suggested So that's the only bit,
The other,
but yeah.
just the other thing with, when we were talking about repairing the roof, also there is an option not just to repair the roof, but to replace the roof with a more fit for purpose insulated roof. And that may be a more practical way to go, which would still enable us to not impede any future decisions that we may make. Would that be correct in my understanding, Toby?
Yeah, and I suppose what's also part of today's work is to look at the avenue of repair, where that takes you, versus, and it's always good to say, either what the councillor has suggested, you remove the roof completely, go back to an outdoor pool, or do you build new?
I think it's really important that every step that we take along this process forms part of a longer term look at the assets, so that we don't end up hamstringing ourselves somewhere along the line for a decision that may be perhaps a little bit knee jerk, but a decision that actually, like I said, impedes us and stops us from taking the next steps further down the line, which may be a series of steps and processes that we have to take over a number of years to improve the quality of the asset. So that's what we've got to be careful in that decision making. Simon.
Just if, for example, we decide to go with option 3 on table here and go the whole hog. What sort of time frame would be required to get to that point for the pool? Is it better to do it in one hit? Or is it more costly to do it in stages and more problematic as far as use of the facility?
So clearly, if you staging any facility is going to be more expensive in the long run, not only from the complexity of re-engaging with it, and there will always be elements that you're having to redo, in the best intention. So doing it in one hit would be more cost effective. Facilities are not getting any cheaper to build; they year on year get more expensive to build. So if you have the money, it's cheaper to do it now than it is in 5 years' time, so to speak. But you have to have the money. So yeah, does that answer your question? So stepping it through allows the funding. If you haven't got the funds, it allows to bring that online. Whereas, building it all in one go is clearly more cost effective, but requires all the funds.
Yes, the time frame just to go.
To that, well, you'd have to go through a demolition, so design, consent, demolition and build, probably 2 years from now.
Good consideration again, Simon. Thank you. Mayor Andy?
Just answering councillor Dalgetty's question about whether you could just lift the roof off. If you lifted the roof off, then you'd also have to do some work on the structural integrity of the walls, wouldn't you?
You would. The walls, we'd have to consider that. If you remove the roof, the walls potentially could be self-supporting without the roof.
Could potentially be
Well, they can on grid line, but this outside wall is propped off the roof, so you're correct. We would have to do some propping work to that. And one thing sorry to add, is that you currently have a seasonal facility that's only used in summer use. So stepping through the option to do minimum keeps it as a seasonal pool. Option 2 was to then move it towards being all year round use. The second option. There was to re-put back a climate control system and an insulated roof that will allow you to run it effectively all year round. So you would double the usage.
That is correct, Toby, and that is certainly
double the usage.
Double the.
But it is a consideration. It is part of the consideration when we made the first decision 8-10 months ago to close the pool and to, as we've said, to take a broader look at what's going on. That was one of the considerations that we're having. If we're going to do that, bearing in mind that we'd been out recently through a consenting process and there was a great deal of interest from the community to have the pool open for additional swimming throughout the winter period. The condition of the complex itself, councillors felt that it didn't warrant doing that given its condition. This is now actually probably brings the ability to have it open for a longer swim period with the advantages of having some improvements done to the overall complex. So it is also part of those conversations to be had, I think.
I should just point out though, in moving it to an indoor insulated all year round facility increases your energy and running costs.
Yes.
Yeah, of facilities.
We're well aware of that. I can assure you. Simon?
Just clarification, your scope is only just the pool, and there's a small gym complex beside that forms part of that facility. So there's nothing happening in that space because it's
We haven't
also
looked at
up.
that.
Right, we do have two or three options in front of us. So what I would like to do now is there's any further general questions from councillors or comments from staff here in this space. It's been a good conversation. It's good that we've managed to get this recorded so that we can get some clarity out there around what our thinking is and also some of the issues that we're facing with regards to the bill. Some of these reports in front of us do have some initial suggested costings. They are by no means quotes or anything to that nature. They are a very, very high-end view of potentially what some of the options that we face could be in front of us. With that in mind and the commercial sensitivity of some of those costings and also the disclosing of some of those costings to potential contractors, I feel it is appropriate to move to public excluded at this stage of today's meeting so that we can take a look at some of these things in a little bit more detail. So I will suggest we move to public excluding on the grounds of commercial sensitivity of the further conversations of today's workshop. I'll move that from the chair, seeking a seconder. Thank you, councillor Sharland. All those in favour? Against, that motion is carried. Thank you for that. Let's carry on.